So quickly jumping into what's new for 3ds Max 2021. Well, the first thing that I'd like to talk to you guys about would be the new added feature of bake to texture. Now, before I go on telling you about how the added functionality helps you, I'd just like to talk about how Autodesk 3ds Max 2021 is focused on modernization, performance, fit, and finish. There's an all-new experience for texture baking installation, major improvements to the viewport, and key enhancements to Substance tools, ProSound, and SketchUp imports. There have been a few speed improvements in the workflow as well, and Python 3 has been integrated as the default Python interpreter for 2021. So now just coming back to our bake to texture option. Now it's a bit more modernized in terms that you have the added functionality of roughness and metalness maps added into Arnold. There's an industry standard maps support that's included in this new 2021 software. There's new baked elements for map overrides, which allows advanced and powerful workflows with OSL and procedural maps to be integrated into the 3ds Max environment. With the inclusion of Python, you have a fully scriptable environment for customization and automation. So it's gone out in a major way of improving 3ds Max over, I suppose, the 2020 version in terms of visualization and with added support for physical-based rendering as well. The next bit that has come into the mix is scripting with Python. So with Python, you then have the freedom to create APIs, which allows you to create cross-application user interfaces. Python 2 is also still supported under the 2021 software, but Python 3 has been set up as the default, I suppose, the default for Python interpreter. So you can use different sets of scripts and codes to add in a bit of functionality if you needed to with the help of Python. So that is a major addition to this visualization environment, which gives you a whole load of freedom to be able to customize, I suppose. So the next big thing that's gone into the update of 2021 is that Arnold has been set up as the default renderer. It presents users with a modern and high-end rendering experience right out of the box. It gives you. It also supports the new baked texture workflows, which highly improves how your visualization or your rendering is done. Usually for heavier assemblies or heavier environments, you tend to have a bit of I suppose bit of a slowdown with how the rendering system works. But with Arnold being set up as the default renderer, it has increased, and it has also provided with a new efficient way of converting a few materials from the physical material. So the addition of Arnold as the default renderer has been a huge addition. Another new feature that's come in is the physically based rendering technology. So 3ds Max 2021 adds several features to simplify the use of PBR workflows in the viewport when rendering and when working with real-time engines. What it does for you is it basically gives you a more realistic shading option or visualization option with your product. So you can see on screen you have a traditional shader content and you have physical based rendering shader content. You can see that the imagery is different in terms that the one with the PBR looks much more realistic, and I suppose the colors, you can see that on the traditional shader content, the colors or the visualization is pretty much the same, but under the physically based model, it's more of how the environment, how the product would look in real time. So it's an improved visualization functionality that goes a long way in improving your final renders or your final animation video creations that you do. I suppose the next bit that has been improved in here, the physical based rendering also comes in with the full export and import of physical material in an FBX format. So you can bring in materials you like and customize your visualization as much as possible. The next bit that I wanted to talk to you was about the improved viewport. Now, a simple viewport configuration workflow allows you to produce high quality and high fidelity viewports which were previously cumbersome to achieve. What it also has given us is the ability to save those new viewport settings as presets. Now, what that can help is if you're working to render stuff, I suppose continuously, or it's a major chunk of your product workflow, your customizable settings can be saved now. So over and over, you wouldn't spend more time, setting it up right, rather than you'll spend a lot less time trying to set up, your system right, and less time working on it. But with this improved quality and settings rule, where you can save your presets, it gives you a whole bit of, I suppose, customization option and cuts down on your workflow time. The new roughness support from physical material also gives it a more realistic view and gives you as much as I suppose as much high definition visualization as it can. There has also been an added support for up to 8K, I suppose, in pixels in terms of visualization, and the viewport statistics performance has been improved massively. Shadows for lights are now on by default, so you don't have to go around doing them. Every time you add an assembly or a material into 3ds Max set. The improvements continue on with OSL shaders being added in to the system. The OSL shaders now support a custom UI template designed in Qt Designer, as well as several new ways to drive the user interface from the metadata, allowing a much more visually appealing and usable UI. Some of the new OSL shaders that have been added into the 2021 software include color correction, HDRI environment, and HDRI lights. So if you were to create custom, I suppose, HDRIs, that's good for you as well. It's an added bonus, I suppose, having the ability to do that in that environment. You also have camera projections, object projections that have been thrown into the 2021 software. Overall, in terms of the shading environment, Autodesk is trying to make it as much realistic as possible. So yeah, that's what the OSL shaders are about in this version of 3ds Max. Also, there have been massive improvements to the filing system. So basically, when you save your scene files with a large number of assets, it has been significantly sped up. You also have the option to save files that have 1,000 or more assets much more quicker than you would be able to do usually, or previously in the 2020 software. The next bit that has come into the 2021 edition of 3ds Max is the improvement to chamfers. Now, there have been massive improvements to the chamfering environment with in terms of providing consistency with the chamfer modifier work that was added and refined in the previous releases. There's an added support for new chamfer technology to the vertex, edge, and face level component modes of it. The component modes of the edit poly and editable poly objects. Users can now actually utilize the benefits of 3ds Max's leading chamfer tech to add detail and refinement to the poly models. You also have the capability to add, I suppose, support for edge depth, edge end bias, and radial bias control and refinement. It's much more easier to add in chamfers and different sorts of features onto your part or assembly when it's in the 3ds Max environment as well. Just to give you a more sharper imaging or crisper imaging that you're looking for, really. The next bit that has come into the 2021 software is the weighted normals modifier. So based on user demand, Autodesk have added support for weighted normals to be calculated and applied to models in 3ds Max. You have the ability to generate hard edge normals for your mesh via defined smoothing groups or hard edges, using area, angle, and largest face weight options to influence the direction of the computed normal results. So with the weighted normals modifier, you now have the option to control the smoothing and the blending of the various results or your models to increase the output. So again, customization, visualization has been improved a lot. You can generate your mesh data a lot more quicker with 2021. Speeding up your user interface and your workflow has one of the primary targets that Autodesk have been focusing on with this version of the software. The next bit that we look at is going to be importing from SketchUp. So the ability to skip hidden items while importing SketchUp files has been added. Based on customer feedback, they've also added the ability to preserve layer information from the SketchUp file and use it automatically to assign imported objects to matching max layers. So what Autodesk are trying to do here is basically trying to get you to work much more quicker and much more conveniently with third-party softwares. If you tend to build up your stuff in SketchUp and then bring it in just for visualization, Autodesk have sped up that workflow as well and given you a few options to make your import or opening up the file in an environment in 3ds Max much more quicker and easier. So there's also been an added Substance update. Updates to the latest Substance engine for native file loading have been added. There is no longer the need to export the maps from Substance Designer. There's also support for up to 8K textures, and also the Substance tool has now been shifted into a plugin. So if you're not using that on the regular, you can actually avoid installing it altogether and only install it if and when you actually need to do that. In terms of now all of this is in terms of visualization and how Autodesk have tried to make software faster and more easier to use for the end user. They've also added a bit more support for the ProSound, where you can throw in a bit of audio onto your visualization. So there's an added support for unlimited number of audio clips. Previously there was a limit of 100 clips only. There have been a few issues with the ProSound command in 3ds Max which have now been improved and fixed. So overall, adding a bit of audio onto your visualization has become much more easier without you having to go on to another software for throwing on audio into your onto your 3ds Max models, really. There has also been there have also been improvements made to the FBX environment where you have the option to export animation only. It was available only if you were able to script it, but now you have the option to also export it directly directly from the user interface. So there has also been added support in the FBX exporter to export the original the original of the baked material. So that's really a few more additions that Autodesk have made to the FBX environment in terms of adding to, or adding and making exporting content out of 3ds Max environment much more easier. There's also physical material support that's available, and the FBX has been updated supporting to support exporting and importing of OSL nodes in 3ds Max. So what Autodesk have gone for here is basically when you're trying to improve your workflow in terms of exporting files or importing files, the FBX environment comes in very handy. It's been made to work quicker and give you the option to reduce the content on your file size, basically to improve and quicken your workflows. The next bit that I want to talk to you guys about today is how Autodesk have gone on to make third-party developer tools much more compatible with 3ds Max. So these are a few third-party tools that you might use in your 3ds Max environment on a day-to-day basis. So what Autodesk have gone on to do with the 2021 software is give you the ability to be able to work with these extensions or with these plugins without having to worry about how they'd be compatible with the latest software. So even if these softwares are from the 2020 environment, you have the option to use them with the 2021 software. So backwards compatibility has been added for plugins and add-ins into 3ds Max. It also supports new AMG and OSL shaders and scene converter extensions, which allows you to use a whole new range of third-party developer tools, really. I suppose those are the few improvements that that 3ds Max 2021 has. I suppose if there's any questions, you can go ahead and ask me them now. And yeah, I suppose thank you for joining me today on this webinar about what's new for 3ds Max 2021.